Welcome to the Cambridge Financial Podcast with Bert Salazar, CEO at Cambridge Financial Partners, LLC. This podcast is all about tax-preferred retirement planning, economics, financial risk management, and achieving a risk-free and successful financial life. Now, your host, Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar.
Hey, good day, everyone. This is Bert Salazar, and I'm the host for the Bert Salazar Retirement Show, and I want to thank you all for joining me once again, as we do every single week. This is actually episode 153, so we've been doing this for quite some time, and the title of this episode is, Why is the History of Money So Important Today? You know, I've been getting a number of emails and phone calls, and I've been having reviews with all my clients because I do that right after tax season to make certain that all their investments are done correctly, that their retirement assets are properly situated, and that their tax planning is done not only for now, but also for the next few years along those lines. So, you know, one of the questions that I've been getting quite often is, you know, Bert, what's going on with this issue of cryptocurrencies and, you know, what's happening with the economy in the United States? What do you think, you know, we're going to be seeing in the very near future? And obviously, I want to take a few minutes and kind of cover, you know, some of the things that I'm seeing today because, you know, the U.S. dollar and retirement assets are being devastated by taxes, inflation, you know, loss opportunity cost, and so forth. So I want to spend a few minutes today, you know, kind of talking a little bit as to, you know, why is it so important today to understand the history of money, because there's a major change taking place in the world today, and especially in the United States. So I think it would be apropos for me to be able to cover some of these things as we do these podcasts on a weekly basis. So I think the big question is, you know, so what's a big deal about money? And this is a question that, you know, it's important because I deal with a lot of clients and I deal with very successful clients. And what's really interesting about this question is that although I do have a number of clients that do very well financially, they know how to make money, but they just don't understand how money works. So this could be a very good preamble to, you know, some of the conversations that I'm having with them, because even those clients of mine that are doing fairly well financially are now very concerned about what's going to happen in the next few months, at least in 2021 under the new tax law. What is happening with inflation? What are going to be the hypothetical inflation risks that we're going to have to face in the future? And how do we adapt to a changing economy? So what's a big deal about money? Well, it squares, number one, it squares financial transactions. So it's something that's very important because we all need some kind of currency in order to make certain that we can square financial transactions. You know, money in many different ways has an economic, financial, and personal impact on human life. You know, the more money you have, the more leverage you have, and the better you can do for yourself and your family. Now, money is not everything, but it kind of makes a lot of the other problems that you may have that we're all going to encounter at some point in time in the future, or that you may be encountering today, a little bit more palatable because of the fact that you have economic assets and you have a personal economy that has plenty of money in order to make ends meet. So that's important. So it does have, you know, not only an economic and financial impact, but also has a personal touch from a human life standpoint. It also, as you very well know, it defines your family status and many other things. And that could be for better or for worse, but, you know, it is what it is. Now, just a point of reference, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about the history of money, because it's important to know how did we get here in order to understand where it is that we're going when it comes to the monetary values of our currency and this thing that is happening now, what I call the New World Order when it comes to cryptonomics, as I call it. So, for those of you that may not know this, the British pound is actually the oldest currency in the world today. So that's important to note based on what I'm going to be talking about. So now that we've talked a little bit about money and the big deal about money and why is money so important for all of us, I think the next question is, when did paper money start? And I've been doing a lot of reading for years on the history of money because I've always been very interested in understanding more and more, especially because of my, accounting and retirement and tax planning background. Economics is very important, and the more I know about economics and economic trends, the better job I can do for not only for myself and my family, but also for my clients as well. So, actually, paper money goes back a long, long way. It actually started with the Chinese during the Tang dynasty, that's Tang dynasty, that was in the year 618 through 907. So that was Anno Domini 618 through 907. And it was almost for more than 500 years there until the practice began to catch up during the 17th century in Europe. So money had been around for centuries. So it started in China, and it actually went like 500 years, and nobody talked about money. Nobody knew about money other than the Chinese under the Tang dynasty. But then sometime around the 17th century, it actually caught on in Europe, and that's where we started to see the expansion of monetary currencies throughout the world. So what currency was used before paper money? Because, we have been around for, at least civilization has been around for thousands and thousands of years. So before the Chinese came out with the idea of a currency or money, what was being used before? Well, if you really want to know, it's before money was invented, goods and services were pretty much traded by using bartering or commodities like salt and cattle and grains, metals, and that goes back as early as 5000 before Christ. So there was no paper currency before Christ. So bartering was a major way of being able to trade. So, for instance, if you had 2 cows and I had 3 goats, and you wanted a goat and I wanted one of your cows, and we could determine, how many goats I would give you for one of your cows and vice versa, and that's how we would be able to trade goods and services back then. And the same thing applied to commodities like salt or grains, metals. Obviously gold, silver was something that was traded quite often and used as a currency thousands and thousands of years ago. So the next question is, now that we've talked a little bit about, what's the big deal about money? When did money actually start? What currencies were used prior to paper money? I think another good question, because before we get to the point that we're going to be discussing today, is what is the most expensive currency in the world? Now, most of you will probably think that it would be either the euro or would be the US dollar, but that's not the case. Actually, the Kuwaiti dinar, which is the acronym is KWD, is the most expensive currency in the world, and it's used widely in the Middle East for oil transactions, and then obviously that expands and changes into dollars throughout the world. But within the Middle East, the Kuwaiti dinar is the most expensive currency at this point in time. Now, there are also 4 types of money that I'm not going to go into it, but it's a good idea to kind of let you know what they are. And that would be commodity money, fiat money, fiduciary money, and then commercial bank money. So we'll talk a little bit about fiat in the next few minutes, but those are the four types of money. Perhaps in another podcast, I'll cover that in a little bit more detail. Now, one of the major questions that we need to answer, and this brings it down now more to the United States, is, why did the United States steer away from the gold standard? Why did they do away with the gold standard? Well, flexibility in the money supply during a crisis, that was one of the main reasons, because when the US dollar was pegged to gold, you could not print any more money than the US Treasury had in gold. So that kind of limited the way for the government to be able to print money at will, especially during crises like wars. We went through the First World War, then WW2, then we had Korea, we had Vietnam, obviously we've had Afghanistan and Iraq for the last 20 plus years. So, every time there's some kind of an emergency, the U.S. government, especially the Treasury, may decide to print more money, but under the gold standard, they were not able to do that. By the way, although steering the U.S. dollar away from the gold standard actually started during FDR, it finally culminated during the President Nixon administration in 1971. And that's when we totally parted ways with the U.S. dollar and the currency pegging to gold. So what did I do? Well, it provided more flexibility, but by the same token, it's important to know the other side of the story, because if you just say, well, I'm glad that they did it, because at the end of the day, now the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve banks throughout the United States have more flexibility as to what to do with the currency. It also created another problem, and the problem is that overnight the U.S. dollar became fiat money, which basically means fiat. The definition of fiat money is that it has no backing other than a promissory note by the U.S. government. Now, the U.S. government has been very, very strong for decades, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be strong in the future. As a matter of fact, there's a tremendous push right now by China to take over the U.S. in the next 10 to 15 years. So, that remains to be seen, but that's one of the problems that you have with fiat money, because at the end of the day, it's not backed by anything. It's not backed by gold. It's not backed by silver. It's only backed by an IOU. So, if I'm the U.S. government and I say, look, I'm giving you this dollar, I'm going to be printing this dollar, and this dollar is worth $1 because I say so, because I'm the U.S. government. And that's what fiat money is. So it can radically change overnight, and that is one of the major problems that we're seeing today because of a number of things that I'll discuss with you in the next few minutes. So now that we've talked about this, now the next question is, what country has the most amount of gold? Since we actually went away from the gold standard, that would be an important point to understand as well, and a good question to understand. And right now, the three major countries in the world that have the most amount of gold, number one is the United States, number two is Germany, and number three is Italy. So depending on which side of the economic spectrum you sit on, getting away or doing away with the gold standard, may have been beneficial in some areas, but it was quite detrimental in others, and that's why the devaluation of the U.S. dollar is very, very interesting and a topic that we need to discuss. So at the end of the day, the next question is, well, then who controls the printing of the U.S. dollar? And I said, well, it's a combination. You have the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve, and they, pretty much control all monetary policy in the United States. And many times, the controlling of monetary policy actually has an impact, and it could be a positive or a negative impact on currencies throughout the world. So that's important to note as well. So I think you would ask yourself, okay, Bert, that's all well and good, and I appreciate a little bit of the history of money and where did it start, and what were we using before money, and who has the most expensive currency, and the different types of money, and a little bit of history on the gold standard. But why are we having this conversation today during this podcast? And I think the reason why we're having this conversation today is because unless you happen to be a hermit, unless you have no TV, no cell phone, no access to Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, or any other social media enterprises that are available, then you should already know the reason why we're having this conversation. Take a look at number one, the dollar devaluation. The dollar has been devaluating ever since 1914, which actually in 1913 was the very beginning of the IRS code, but it has been devaluated ever since. A dollar back in 1914 in today's devaluation is almost worthless. And the dollars, not only today, but tomorrow and every day, is going to be worth less and less as we go forward. So paying attention to the dollar devaluation, because there's nothing that you can do. Well, there is, but we'll talk about that in the next few minutes. But if you stay in the dollar world, there's nothing that you can do, because the few are controlling the decisions for the many. So why are we having this conversation as well? Well, number two is the national debt. We just surpassed over $28 trillion in our national debt. Our national deficit, we have a deficit now of almost $3.3 trillion, which is the biggest deficit that we had ever had in U.S. history. In other words, we are spending $3.3 trillion more than what the U.S. government is actually bringing in. So when you factor the devaluation of the dollar, when you factor the national debt being at the highest level that it's ever been in history, you take a look at the national deficit, which is the deficit is, if not the biggest we've ever had, probably the second to the biggest, other than maybe, or perhaps the deficit during the Second World War. When you look at the unfunded liabilities that we have in this country, and the definition of an unfunded liabilities are all of those promises that the U.S. government has made to all of us. By the way, if you don't know this, one of the promises is the one of fiat money, the promissory note from the U.S. government to each and every one of us. But the definition of an unfunded liability is all of those liabilities that the government has promised to us over the years that they really don't have the money to keep today, because that liability is now sitting at $155 trillion and counting every single second of every single minute of every single day of our lives. Another reason why we're having this conversation is, governmental controls and runaway inflation. Inflation now is the highest that it's been in the last 7 years, and it will continue to go higher. And the reason for that is because of government controls. Again, we have the few controlling the many. And I would hope that in the future political world of the United States, unless we're going to fall apart like we're starting to fall apart now, and actually we've been falling apart for years, but now it's being accelerated, is by the money supply, because inflation is nothing more, nothing less than too much money chasing after too few goods and services. So let me repeat that. The money supply and inflation is equal to too much money chasing after too few goods and services. So it's all about supply and demand. And if the demand is higher than the supply, then obviously the price of those supplies are going to increase, and that's going to create an inflationary trend that we're starting to see now. And then obviously, last but not least, is politics, and I keep preaching this to all of you. I would hope that at some point in time in the future, we would promote and we would elect more mathematicians than we do politicians, because they are destroying our world. And I'm talking about on both sides of the aisle, so I'm not taking any sides on this one, because whether you're a Republican or whether you're a Democrat, you are all guilty, and all these politicians are guilty of manipulation of currency, manipulation of political ways of thinking, manipulation of the national debt, the national deficit, the unfunded liabilities, and then the manipulation of inflation through decisions that are being made at the Treasury and at the Federal Reserve that in many different ways are going to negatively impact every single dollar that you have set aside for your retirement living. So I want to finalize this podcast today, now that I have given you this overview of money and then why we're having this conversation. I want to talk about the New World Order. And if you're not aware of a New World Order, again, you have probably been a hermit for the last 5 years. But the New World Order, number one, is called Cryptonomics, because now there's a cryptocurrency, which is a digital currency that it's already taken over the world. Now there are going to be a lot of people fighting it. A lot of you may be fighting this. The governments throughout the world are already fighting these things that are happening, and many corporations are fighting it as well. But by the same token, there are many companies in the United States and throughout the world that are adopting, that are making a paradigm shift in the way they think, because they all know, and you should all know, that the future of money and monetary policies in the United States and throughout the world is going to be based on digital currency. By the way, if you didn't know this, 90% of all US dollars are digital. Only 10% of US dollars are actually in circulation today. So even the US dollar, 90% of it is already a digital currency. Now, why do I feel very strongly about cryptocurrencies and crypto economics, and why you need to start paying attention to this? Is because cryptocurrencies are actually transferring financial power from the few to the many. Let me repeat that again. Cryptocurrencies are transferring financial powers and power from the few to the many. So what is happening in the crypto world is, because it's digitized, it's a digital currency, the many, each and every one of us, and I've been doing crypto now for some time, each and every one of us that has a portfolio as an additional asset class as part of your retirement plan, and this asset class would now be a crypto asset class, you have control of what's happening with that currency throughout the world. So now everyone that is participating in a blockchain, which is, I'm not going to get into too much of it, I'll do another one on the blockchain, and also on smart contracts. But blockchains, think of it as having a whiteboard on the sky, just similar to having a bookkeeping account ledger on the sky, that it cannot be controlled. Every single trade, every single ledger, every time you trade money for goods and services, for a service, goes into that ledger, and you cannot erase, and they are forever, and it cannot be controlled either by the government or corporations. So it's actually creating a total financial freedom for those of us that are using cryptonomics, knowing that the world is going to go that route no matter what. So in the future, the same way that we went from bartering to creating a currency by the Chinese, and then eventually being adopted by the Europeans in the 17th century, to what the U.S. dollar and the different currencies throughout the world, the euro and the euros and the yen and so forth. We're now moving into a financial digital currency that all of us are going to start using in the future. So the opportunity for you to invest, for you to maximize your retirement assets, for you to kind of pull away from the governmental control on your currency is by starting to invest in cryptocurrencies. Now, there's always risk, so I'm not giving you all any type of financial advice. I will be sharing with you what it is that I do in that marketplace. But the question that you need to ask yourself is, is it more risky for me not to get involved than for me to get involved? And that's a question you're going to have to ask yourself and be able to answer for yourself. So the other reason why the New World Order is taking shape is that, the people do not trust their government anymore. We don't trust the governments. We don't trust the media any longer. The media is now using us, and we have become the puppets of the media, and the media is the puppeteer. The U.S. government is dictating policy, whether you happen to be a Republican or a Democrat. That is having a negative impact on everything that we do in our lives, and will continue, for many generations to come. So we're actually lending money that we don't have, and we're creating money that we don't have. So we have a printing machine, and every time the U.S. Treasury turns that printing machine on, guess what? Each and every dollar that you have worked so hard for, that you have set aside for your retirement for so many years of your life, all of those things that you had to do in order to prevent having a good time with your family so you could save money for a rainy day, is now being dissipated. And dissipated to a point where it's going to be worthless at some point in time in the future. So governmental decisions today, definitely have a tremendous impact on future generations. Now, as I said earlier, digital currencies cannot be controlled by governments, politicians, and or financial institutions. So the leverage of having digital currency, it's something that it's very important to look at as we start to get into the New World Order. Now, supply and demand rule the day in the crypto world, and manipulation does not take place. So once you get involved in the crypto world, then most clients that are now involved in the crypto world are just buying coins, whether they're buying Bitcoin or Ethereum of Cardano or Polkadot, whatever the coin may be. And it's important to do what is known in that crypto world as DYOR, which is do your own research. But these digital currencies cannot be controlled by governments, politicians, and or financial institutions. So they have the liberty and the freedom to be able to go up or down depending on supply and demand and market conditions, which is very important. By the way, Bitcoin is the largest currency in the world. And one of the interesting things about Bitcoin is that there will only be, and this is very important for all of you to note, there will only be 21 million Bitcoins mined / printed in the world. So it is an asset that is scarce. So I think the last Bitcoin is going to be printed or mined in the year 2040. So it's not too far from now. So after that, that currency, that digital currency will not be mined again. So therefore, you can understand why that currency can be a tremendous benefit to each and every one of you because of the fact that it can help you offset inflation in a different way than the dollar could, because the U.S. government can print U.S. dollars at will. There's not a maximum amount as there used to be under the gold standard. So every time they, again, turn on that printer and they start printing U.S. dollars, your money's worth a lot less. So I've been putting a lot of money now into Bitcoin and some other coins that I feel are the stable coins in the market, stable, quote unquote. But, again, I'm not going to give you any type of financial advice, but what I will give you is financial information, education, and most important, I'm going to share with you what it is that I'm doing in that world moving forward into the future. So I'm hoping that this podcast has opened your eyes to understanding the new world order and the reason why we're having this conversation today, and why the new world order is going to be the order of business moving forward for the next many generations that come down the pike at some point in time. So for those of you that may want to pick my brain about this topic and or any other topic, please feel free to reach out. You can call me at area code 786-766-1042. You can also send me an email at Bert, B-E-R-T, at bertsalazar.com, BERTSALAZAR.com. And always remember that my goal for you and for your family and for my clients and for my online community is to kind of help you all, change the way that you see things. Because when you change the way that you see things, the things that you see change. So once again, thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time today, and I'll talk to you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.